Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! As the seconds ticked closer to the start of English 301, Manuel's breath shallowed, and his palms dampened. With quiet urgency, he entered the lecture hall, nursing his beloved book, an old companion bearing the title, The Complete Works of William Shakespeare. Navigating the rows, he reached his familiar sanctuary at the back, a spot chosen to fuel his discreet habit. In the front row, an ever-present figure commanded his gaze like clockwork. Sophia Winters, so effortlessly composed, adorned the desk with textbooks and a notebook, its pages already in eager anticipation of the lecture. She wore her uniform with a pristine elegance that seemed to elevate the simplicity of her attire. Her pen, an extension of her graceful being, seemed to dance across the notebook, leaving a trail of words Manuel imagined would be as artful as their owner. Manuel's heart whispered desires of engaging in intellectual discourse with Sophia about Shakespeare's poetic masterpieces, his thoughts crafting an intricate fantasy of connection. Yet, whenever the moment beckoned, his tongue faltered, refusing to articulate the scripted confidences locked within his mind. Suddenly, the professor, Prophetess, as you know, your final project requires a performance component, and I've decided to pair you up for a twist on Shakespearean tradition. The professor adjusted his glasses and continued. In Elizabethan times, all roles, including female characters, were played by men. For your projects, I want to explore this theatrical convention with contemporary sensibilities. You'll work in pairs, and at least one scene must feature cross-gender casting. A mixture of groans and intrigued murmurs rippled through the classroom. Manuel sank lower in his seat. Public speaking was bad enough without adding costumes to the mix.
I've already assigned your partnerships.
Professor Reynolds produced a sheet of paper and began reading names. Manuel half listened, doodling absently in his notebook until the professor called, Manuel Garcia and Sophia Winters. His pencil snapped. Sophia turned in her seat, scanning the room until her eyes found him. She offered a small, polite smile that sent his heart racing. Manuel managed a stiff nod in return, his mouth suddenly dry. After class, she approached him directly, her navy skirt swishing with each confident step. Hi, Manuel. I guess we're partners. Her voice was warm, with a hint of an accent he couldn't quite place. Do you have time to meet at the library this afternoon to choose our scene?
Yes,
he stammered, clutching his textbook like a shield. That would be fine. Great. 4:00 at the main floor study tables? She didn't wait for confirmation before adding, I was thinking we could do something from 12th Night. It already has gender-bending themes, so it would be perfect. Manuel nodded, not trusting himself to form coherent sentences. See you at 4 then. With a smile that transformed her entire face, Sophia turned and walked away, leaving behind the subtle scent of jasmine. That afternoon in the library, Manuel arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a quiet corner table and spreading out his books in an attempt to look studious rather than nervous. Sophia appeared precisely at 4, setting down a sleek laptop adorned with literary quote stickers. I've been researching, she announced without preamble. The scene where Viola, disguised as Cesario, speaks with Olivia would be perfect. You could play Olivia, and I'll be Viola as Cesario. Manuel blinked.
You want me to play the woman's part?
That's the assignment, isn't it? Besides, she added with a mischievous glint in her eye, I've always thought Viola had the most interesting character journey. Wouldn't you agree? Before Manuel could formulate a response, Sophia launched into an impassioned analysis of gender performance in Shakespearean comedy. Her enthusiasm was infectious, her knowledge impressive. By the end of their 2-hour session, they'd selected Act 1, Scene 5 for their performance and sketched out a modern interpretation. "We should meet again tomorrow to start blocking it out," Sophia suggested, closing her laptop. "My roommate has afternoon classes, so my apartment would be quiet. Would that work?" Manuel nodded, ignoring the nervous flutter in his stomach. "What time?" 2? I'll text you the address." She held out her phone. "Put your number in?" His fingers trembled slightly as he typed his contact information. When he handed the phone back, their fingers brushed, sending an electric jolt up his arm. The next afternoon found Manuel standing awkwardly outside Sophia's apartment door, knocking tentatively. She answered immediately, dressed casually in jeans and a faded university sweatshirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Come in. I cleared some space in the living room for us to practice." She gestured toward an area where the furniture had been pushed against the walls. "I've been thinking about costumes. They don't need to be elaborate, but we should have something to help us get into character." Manuel hovered near the doorway. "I assumed we'd just read the parts." Sophia laughed. "The assignment specifically mentions the tradition of men playing women's roles. We need to honor that somehow." She disappeared into another room, returning with a navy pleated skirt, the same one she'd worn to class. "This might work for Olivia, just to get a feel for the character, of course." Manuel stared at the garment, as though it might bite him. "You want me to wear that? Now?" "Just to rehearse. Nobody will see except me." She held it out. "The bathroom's down the hall if you want privacy to change." Reluctantly, Manuel took the skirt, its fabric surprisingly soft between his fingers. In the bathroom, he stared at his reflection for a long moment before slipping off his jeans. The skirt slid up his legs, the pleated material settling around his waist. It was loose there but snug around his hips. The hem fell just above his knees, revealing calves dusted with dark hair. He looked ridiculous, he was certain. A 6-foot guy with broad shoulders in a woman's skirt. But there was also something interesting about the contrast, the way the skirt hung from his frame, the sensation of air around his legs. Taking a deep breath, Manuel emerged from the bathroom. Sophia's expression froze, her eyes widening slightly. She approached slowly, circling him with a thoughtful expression. "The waist is too big," she murmured, stepping closer. Her hands reached out, adjusting the skirt on his hips, pulling it lower. "There, that's better." Her proximity made his breath catch. Up close, he could see flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "You look better in this skirt than I do," she said softly, stepping back to admire the effect. "The navy really complements your complexion." Manuel felt heat creep up his neck, spreading across his cheeks. "I feel ridiculous." "You don't look ridiculous," she countered firmly. "You look interesting, different, in a good way." They began rehearsing, the strangeness of wearing a skirt gradually fading as Manuel immersed himself in Olivia's character. By the end of their session, he had almost forgotten his unusual attire until Sophia said, "Same time tomorrow? I'll bring more costume pieces." The next day, Sophia produced a simple white blouse to go with the skirt, and a pair of ballet flats that were miraculously close to his size. "My cousin left these here," she explained. "She has bigger feet than me." Each rehearsal brought new additions: a necklace, a cardigan, Eventually, even a long blonde wig that Sophia had borrowed from the theater department. Olivia would have been fair-haired, she explained, carefully adjusting the shoulder-length blonde locks around his face. What began as an academic exercise slowly evolved into something more complex. Manuel found himself looking forward to their rehearsals, to the moments when he transformed into someone else entirely. There was a freedom in the clothing, in the way the skirt moved around his legs, in the sensation of the blonde wig brushing against his neck. One afternoon, 3 weeks into their project, Sophia paused mid-rehearsal. "Your stubble is distracting me," she said thoughtfully. "Would you mind if I covered it with makeup? Just for authenticity." Before he could object, she was guiding him to a chair in her bathroom, producing brushes and sponges and creams from a cosmetics bag. Her touch was gentle as she applied foundation to his jaw, her face inches from his as she concentrated. "Close your eyes," she instructed, and he obeyed, feeling the soft brush of powder across his eyelids.
"Now, look up."
The unfamiliar sensation of mascara being applied made him blink. "Sorry, keep still." When she finally allowed him to look in the mirror, Manuel barely recognized himself. The person staring back had his features but softer somehow, cheekbones more pronounced, eyes larger and more expressive, lips fuller with a hint of pink. Combined with the blonde wig, the transformation was startling. "What do you think?" Sophia asked, watching his reaction carefully. "I look different." His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "You look beautiful," she corrected, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "Like Olivia, but also like someone else. Someone who was always there, waiting." That night, alone in his apartment, Manuel couldn't stop thinking about his reflection in Sophia's bathroom mirror. He found himself searching online, reading articles about gender expression, about people who felt uncomfortable in their assigned roles. Some of what he read resonated deeply, awakening questions he'd never allowed himself to consider. At their next rehearsal, Manuel arrived with his face freshly shaved, his nails neatly trimmed. Sophia smiled knowingly, but said nothing as she helped him into the now familiar costume. When the makeup and wig were in place, she stepped back and asked, "What should I call you when you're like this? It might help us stay in character." Manuel hesitated, only briefly.
"Layla,"
he said, the name emerging from some hidden part of himself.
"You can call me Leela."
Sophia nodded, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. "Nice to meet you, Lila. Shall we continue?" That afternoon, something shifted. In the safety of Sophia's apartment, Manuel allowed himself to fully inhabit this new persona. His gestures became more fluid, his voice softened, and he found himself laughing more freely than he had in years. When their rehearsal ended, he found himself reluctant to change back into his jeans and t-shirt. Sophia noticed his hesitation. "You could borrow these, if you want," she offered carefully. "To practice at home." Lila, in that moment, accepted with a grateful smile. Over the next few days, Lila began to take shape in the privacy of Manuel's apartment. He experimented with makeup, following tutorials online, learning to contour his jaw and highlight his cheekbones. He practiced walking in the ballet flats, then in a pair of low heels he ordered online. He washed the borrowed clothes carefully, hanging them to dry rather than risking the dryer. A week before their presentation, Sophia invited him over for a final rehearsal. "I have something for you," she said when he arrived. She handed him a shopping bag from a local boutique. Inside was a black pencil skirt and a pale blue blouse with delicate pearl buttons.
I thought maybe,
For the actual presentation? These will fit you better than my clothes. Manuel was momentarily speechless.
Sophia, I can't accept this.
Of course you can. Consider it a thank you for being such a dedicated project partner. Her expression grew serious. And for trusting me with everything else. That night, after rehearsing in his new clothes, Manuel stayed for dinner. Over pasta and wine, they talked about everything except the looming question of what would happen after their presentation. Finally, Sophia set down her glass. Can I ask you something personal? Manuel nodded, throat suddenly tight.
Are you happy when you're Lila?
The question hung in the air between them.
Yes,
he admitted finally.
Happier than I've been in a long time.
Sophia reached across the table, taking his hand. Then maybe Lila doesn't have to exist only for this project. The day of their presentation arrived. Manuel stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection. The person who looked back was still recognizable as himself, but subtly transformed. His dark stubble was gone, replaced by smooth skin. His hair had grown longer over the semester, now reaching past his ears, and he'd been experimenting with styling it differently, letting his natural blonde color grow out. Today would be the first time Lila existed outside the safe confines of his apartment or Sophia's living room. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. He dressed carefully in the black pencil skirt and blue blouse Sophia had given him, adding sheer stockings and the low heels he'd been practicing in. His makeup was subtle but effective, softening his features without looking theatrical. A delicate silver necklace completed the ensemble. When he arrived at the classroom, several students were already setting up for their presentations. He hesitated in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. Then Sophia was there, dressed in tailored trousers and a waistcoat for her role as Viola disguised as Cesario. "You came," she said, relief evident in her voice. "You look amazing." "I'm terrified," Lila admitted. "Don't be. You know this scene perfectly, and you look exactly as you should." Sophia squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Besides, everyone will just think it's for the assignment." Their performance went better than either could have hoped. The class seemed genuinely impressed by their interpretation, and Professor Reynolds nodded approvingly throughout. When they finished, the applause was enthusiastic.
"Excellent work,"
the professor commented.
"Your interpretation of Olivia was particularly nuanced, Mr. Garcia. The physicality you brought to the role demonstrated a deep understanding of the character's emotional journey."
Lila felt a surge of pleasure at the compliment, even as she registered the use of Mr. Garcia. Sophia beamed beside her, squeezing her hand under the table. After class, as they walked across campus together, Sophia asked, "How does it feel, being Lila outside?" "Strange," she admitted. "But good strange. Like I can finally breathe properly." She glanced around at the other students hurrying to classes, expecting stares or comments, but most people barely gave her a second glance. Those who did often smiled appreciatively at her outfit. "What happens now?" Sophia asked quietly. "After the project?" Lila took a deep breath. "I don't think I can go back to being Manuel all the time. These past weeks have shown me something I think I always knew but couldn't face." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "So, Lila stays?" "I think she's always been here, waiting to be acknowledged." Lila smiled, feeling both vulnerable and strangely powerful. But I don't know how to do this. Any of it. You don't have to figure it all out at once, Sophia reassured her. And you don't have to do it alone. The following Monday, Lila arrived at her literature class wearing a burgundy sweater dress and black tights, her growing blonde hair styled softly around her face. She'd spent the weekend researching, making appointments, having difficult but necessary conversations with herself in the mirror. Sophia was waiting outside the classroom, her face lighting up when she spotted Lila approaching. "You came as yourself," she said, sounding pleased but not surprised. "I did," Lila confirmed, smoothing her dress nervously. "I'm still figuring out what that means exactly, but this feels right." They entered the classroom together, Lila bracing herself for reactions. There were a few double takes, some whispers, but nothing overtly hostile. Professor Reynolds merely nodded in greeting, as though nothing unusual had occurred. After class, he asked her to stay behind for a moment.
"Ms. Garcia,"
he said, using the title naturally.
"I wanted to commend you on your Shakespeare presentation. It was clear you connected deeply with the material."
"Thank you, Professor," Lila replied, heart swelling at the simple acknowledgement. "If you need any support navigating university resources during your transition, my office hours are always open to you." Tears pricked at Lila's eyes. "I appreciate that." As the semester progressed, Lila's wardrobe expanded beyond borrowed items. Shopping with Sophia became a weekend ritual, finding clothes that fit her taller frame, experimenting with styles that felt authentic. Her growing blonde hair began to require more attention, and she learned to care for it properly, enjoying the way it now framed her face in soft waves. There were challenges, of course. Changing her name officially required paperwork and explanations. Some friends drifted away, uncomfortable with her transformation. Family conversations were difficult and ongoing, but there were unexpected allies too. Classmates who made a point of using her correct name, professors who accommodated her needs without fuss, strangers who simply treated her as the woman she was becoming. And always, there was Sophia, who had seen Lila before Lila had fully seen herself. 6 months after their Shakespeare presentation, they sat together in a cafe near campus, studying for finals. Lila wore a floral dress that complemented her figure, her blonde hair now reaching past her shoulders. Makeup had become second nature, a simple daily ritual rather than a theatrical transformation. "Do you ever miss being Manuel?" Sophia asked suddenly, looking up from her textbook. Lila considered the question seriously. "I don't think so. Manuel was incomplete. A first draft of who I was supposed to be." She smiled, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Lila feels like the final version, the one that was intended all along." Sophia reached across the table, intertwining their fingers. "I'm glad I got to know both versions, but I have to admit, I'm rather fond of this one." Lila laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Me too." She hesitated, then added, "I never thanked you properly, you know, for seeing something in me that I couldn't see myself." "You don't need to thank me for that," Sophia replied, her expression softening. "Some people spend their whole lives hiding who they really are. You were brave enough to discover yourself and then become that person, completely and unapologetically. That's a rare kind of courage." "I couldn't have done it without you," Lila insisted. "That day you handed me your navy skirt, it changed everything." "The skirt didn't change you," Sophia corrected gently. "It just revealed what was already there." Later that evening, walking back to Lila's apartment, Sophia slipped her hand into Lila's. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "What is it?" Lila prompted, when Sophia fell silent. "Would you consider... that is, I was wondering if you might want to be more than friends?" The words came out in a rush. "I've had feelings for you since before, but everything was changing, and I didn't want to complicate things, and..." Lila stopped walking, turning to face her. "Sophia Winters, are you asking me out?" Sophia blushed, a rare occurrence.
"I suppose I am, yes."
Lila's heart soared. "I've been in love with you since the first day of Shakespeare class," she admitted. "I used to sit in the back row just to look at you without being noticed." "Really?" Sophia looked genuinely surprised. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because Manuel was terrified of everything, especially beautiful, intelligent women." Lila smiled. Lila, on the other hand, knows exactly what she wants. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed Sophia softly. When they parted, both were smiling. "So, that's a yes?" Sophia asked, her eyes shining. "That's a definite yes," Lila confirmed, taking her hand again as they continued walking. A year later, Lila stood in front of her bedroom mirror, admiring her reflection. Her blonde hair now fell in soft waves to the middle of her back, framing a face that had softened further with hormone therapy. The navy blue dress she wore was new, purchased for this evening's special occasion. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Coming!" she called, grabbing her purse and giving herself one final approving glance. Sophia waited outside, resplendent in a red cocktail dress that complemented her dark hair perfectly. "You look stunning," she said, taking in Lila's appearance with obvious appreciation. "So do you," Lila replied, leaning in for a quick kiss. "Ready for our anniversary dinner?" As they walked to the restaurant, hand in hand, Lila reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the nervous young man hiding in the back of a literature class to the confident woman she was today had been a path with many unexpected turns. But each step had brought her closer to her authentic self and to the woman now walking beside her. "What are you thinking about?" Sophia asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "Shakespeare," Lila replied with a small smile. "This above all, to thine own self be true." Sophia laughed, squeezing her hand. "Polonius would be proud." "I was terrified that day you first handed me your skirt," Lila admitted. "I never imagined where it would lead." "I had a feeling," Sophia said softly. "Not about everything that would happen, but about you. There was something in your eyes when you looked at me across that classroom. Something longing and lost at the same time." "And now?" Lila asked, curious. Sophia stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Now I see someone who has found herself completely. Someone strong and beautiful and real." She reached up, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind Lila's ear. "Someone I fall more in love with every day." Under the warm glow of street lamps, they kissed again, two women very different from the students who had once been paired for a Shakespeare project, yet in the most important ways, exactly the same people who had recognized something essential in each other from the very beginning. "Come on," Lila said, taking Sophia's hand once more. "We have reservations to keep and a future to plan." Together they walked toward the restaurant, their shadows merging on the sidewalk behind them. Two figures moving forward in perfect step, exactly as they were meant to be. Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!